Interest rates rise again, but the ECB softens the pace of the increase, bringing the base rate to 2.5% across the Eurozone.
EU leaders meet in Brussels as they seek consensus on a gas price cap and subsidies for European business.
The President of the EU Parliament has promised a reform package to tackle corruption among MEPs after the Assembly's worst corruption scandal in decades.
MEPs vote by a massive majority to affirm that Soviet Russia launched a genocide through starvation on Ukraine in the 1930s.
More delays and shutdowns for the UK as the country's biggest nursing union goes on strike for the first time in the NHS's history.
The European Central Bank has raised interest rates again, but by less than its two most recent hikes. The main rate has increased by 0.5 percentage points to 2.5%. But with the Eurozone still gripped by soaring inflation, the bank is warning that further hikes are inevitable.
Interest rates will still have to rise significantly at a steady pace to reach levels that are sufficiently restrictive to ensure a timely return of inflation to our 2% medium-term target. Keeping interest rates at restrictive levels will over time reduce inflation by dampening demand.
The ECB's decision follows similar moves this week by the US and UK, but at 2.5%, the Eurozone's current rate is still significantly lower than in America or Britain. Increasing interest rates is one of the main tools used by central banks to tackle rising prices by slowing the economy down. The cost of living has been surging this year across much of the globe, fueled by Russia's war in Ukraine and lingering shortages of supplies following the pandemic.
Shares in Europe and Asia fell on Thursday after the Federal Reserve warned of more interest hikes following its latest increase. On Wednesday, the US Central Bank raised its benchmark rate half a point to reach the highest level in 15 years. The Bank of England is also expected to announce its own 0.5 percentage point hike on Thursday. Federal policymakers forecast the rate will reach a range of 5 to 5.25% by the end of 2023.
Energy is once again high on the agenda of EU leaders for the last summit of the year. But there's little hope an agreement will be reached on a price cap for gas. A decision needs to be made not only on the price, but also on when to activate it and for how long. Divisions remain among member states, even if they agree on the need for a solution.
And it's necessary to send a very clear signal to the markets, but also to Russia, that we will not accept the weaponization of gas at the expense of our citizens and our businesses.
Another topic of discussion is how to deal with US President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, a policy that poses a serious risk to the competitiveness of European business. The European Commission is proposing the idea of common EU borrowing when it comes to subsidizing the industrial sector, but some member states like Germany are reluctant.
I think we're in Europe really at a point where we risk to be disindustrialized. And today our answer is not a common answer. Today we see that too often countries are trying to install schemes on their own. It looks a bit like a game of the deepest pocket. And yes, some countries might think they have deeper pockets, but in a few months we're all at the end of what we can do.
There's other tensions simmering too. After Hungary dropped its veto on the issue this week, Poland is now threatening to block the decision on a minimum corporate tax and even on an €18 billion economic aid package for Ukraine.
Of course, Russia is blackmailing us every day, but if we start to blackmail each other, this is not good, and this is absolutely not good for the European Union.
More positively, Bosnia and Herzegovina is expected to be granted candidate status towards joining the European Union. Chris Pitches, Euronews, Brussels.
The President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, is ready to turn the institution upside down so that a corruption scandal, such as the one allegedly involving Qatar, will never happen again. Metsola has announced changes to promote transparency and prevent the bribery of MEPs by countries or lobbies.
The vote is closed.
Trust that has taken years to build, but only moments to destroy, will need to be rebuilt, and this work starts now. We need to right the wrongs, and we need to send a powerful message to those external actors who try to undermine us, that we will not yield, that we will stand by our values, the rule of law, justice and due process.
Francesco Giorgi, the partner of Greek MEP Eva Kaili, who also serves as the EU Parliament's Vice President, along with 2 other people, are accused of corruption, money laundering and criminal operations, all linked to possible Qatari and Moroccan schemes to illegally influence the Parliament. The former Italian MEP Antonio Panzeri is presumed to be the mastermind behind the plot. An investigation has also been launched into the NGO No Peace Without Justice. Belgian police seized more than 1.5 million euros in cash in 2 homes and a suitcase. Eva Kaili will appear in court in Belgium next Thursday.
The European Parliament has voted to recognise the Ukraine famine of the 1930s as a deliberate genocide by Soviet Russia. MEPs voted by 507 votes for to 12 against to approve the motion. Known as the Holodomor, the Parliament now affirms that the famine had the, quote, intention of destroying a group of people by deliberately inflicting living conditions leading inexorably to their physical annihilation. MEPs from across the political spectrum spoke in favour of the motion.
Holodomor is not a tragedy of 1 or 2 families. It is an attempted extermination of an entire nation by the Soviet regime. Stalin's brigades pillaged Ukrainian villages in search of remaining grain. They were filled with hate towards Ukrainians, fueled by Soviet propaganda.
Euronews spoke to the Polish MEP who introduced the motion. He said that there are direct parallels between Stalin's actions in Ukraine and Russia's current invasion.
It was another attempt to wipe out the notion of Ukraine from the map. Something that Tsarist authorities did in the 19th century by, for example, banning the use of the printing in Ukrainian, and something that President Putin blatantly tries to achieve today. By starving and subjugating Ukrainians with cold and lack of electricity.
Millions died of hunger in Ukraine and elsewhere in the Soviet Union between 1932 and 1933. Some historians attribute it to disastrous agricultural collectivization policies. Others, however, say it was an attempt to crush Ukrainian independence hopes.
With national rail strikes grinding the UK to a halt, the country's biggest nursing union began its first ever strike on Thursday. For the first time in the NHS's history, around 100,000 nurses are demanding a wage increase of 19% to deal with the cost of living. At Wednesday's PMQs, opposition leader Keir Starmer slammed Prime Minister Rishi Sunak for ignoring medical staff's welfare.
In 12 hours' time, there's a nurses' strike. All he needs to do is meet the nurses. His inaction speaks volumes. As ever with this Prime Minister, it's Tory politics first, patients second. Mr. Speaker, nurses going on strike is a badge of shame for this government. Instead of showing leadership, he's playing games with people's health.
Last month in Spain, nursing staff also went on strike, demanding better pay conditions. According to the OECD, the average nurse's salary in the UK was €42,000 per annum. Across Europe, only 7 countries' nurses make over €50,000 a year. The annual salary for a nurse in France or Italy was less than half the annual salary in Belgium, and almost exactly half that in Switzerland.
German tennis legend Boris Becker has been freed from prison after serving 8 months of a 2.5-year sentence. According to Associated Press, the 3-time Wimbledon champion now faces deportation from the UK. The 55-year-old has lived in Britain since 2012. In April of this year, Becker was put in prison for illicitly transferring large amounts of money and hiding assets after he was declared bankrupt in 2017.
Becker rose to stardom in 1985 at the age of 17 when he became the first unseeded player to win the men's Wimbledon singles title.